Hold on, everybody. We're just getting all our little ducks in a row. I dreamed about a rubber float duck last night. Hold on, everybody. We're just getting. Hi, welcome to CreateAWorld. My name is Tantra Mott. Today is a particularly significant day for me as a seer, a facilitator of consciousness, a prophetess, uh, and a cellular empath. The people that are with us today in our six-person gab have been at work in a field collective called the Field of Tantra Mott, based on the principles of the meta point, the unity point of so above, so below, and the phenomenon of Mott, balance, harmony, symmetry, grace, and beauty. So today, we're going to do our best. Dr. Heather Hunt and I were in a conversation earlier this week. The timing was perfect. She isn't always available on Fridays. And her commitment to empathic response and vitality medicine, and that the body is sufficient, not deficient, made today's conversation incredibly important. If you saw my advertisement of CreateAWorld, it said the beauty of empathic response and anxiety. Strange title, wouldn't you think? But I can promise you that this is not the time to be trying to get over something. Today is the time, now is the time to actually train ourselves to be with something. There is hardly no system, ology, or ism that doesn't talk about if you can be with depression, if you can be with anxiety, if you can be with trauma. It's usually a through line into a deeper, broader, wider sense of self, and even a new positioning of who you be with yourself, others, and life. So we're going to take that on today in our own fashion. Liz said before she came on, she just came to hold the space. We're all holding the space today. And I'll be going back and forth to the notes, the comments on YouTube. Please feel free. You'll see my eyes going all over the place. Please feel free to ask any questions you want to ask of us. It's important to me and to the rest of us. And there's one last thing I want to say about this. We're in a phenomenon that I was present to over 50 years ago. So as a seer and a prophetess, it was really amazing to me, and many of you saw it on my Facebook page. It was really stunning to me what I went through the day of the recent election. But all of us in our own manner are present what there is to be present to. Is just because of this gift I've got. I get to have a sort of hyperdrive around it. And it was like one of those clowns used to punch and then they pop back up. That was the experience. It was like I got popped, went down, and then when I popped back up, something had passed, like a storm, and I was reset. So there's going to be a lot of resets going on as our world changes. We're in the meta point of a devolutionary, evolutionary moment. Up until now, and I'm really serious, up until now, there have been those of us operating on behalf of the evolutionary moment, what moves us to the next greater whole, what creates more relationship, more in our work, in the field of Tantra Mott, intimacy, affinity, vulnerability, and transparency, or what separates us from each other more, the polarization that we often see. Well, we're right in that singularity that astrologers, so many systems, including my own, have been predicting. Well, we're here. So listen today to be served. It's good, given the intensity of what's going on, it's going to be hard not to listen through the filter of, do I believe in that? Do I not believe in that? Is this right? Is this wrong? Is this good? Is this bad? But just listen to be served. We're operating today on behalf of our love of humanity, on behalf of our love of ourselves, on behalf of our love of what created all of us, each in a unique and essential fashion. Now I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Heather Hunt, DC, from my perspective. The book, You as the Mind of Creation, would have never been written without her. The first time I met Heather, she globbed onto me. I'd never had anybody glob onto me like that. I got to spend quite a bit of time answering a treasure trove of questions for quite a few years. And it was really beautiful because she stayed with me in such a way that this realm of reality I didn't separate from when I came here could be brought into language as part of the original nature of the original design of human being before things went awry. So I watched her form her own. She had a vision, she told me early on when I met her, and that vision is now true. She has her company, Vitality Medicine. If I do the literal wrong, you can correct me. And she's part of the new systems of reality rising. And that's a beautiful thing. So it was great, the synergy and the synchronicity that had her be available today. And remember how you're supposed to be here. You're eavesdropping on this conversation. We're talking amongst ourselves. And then you can insert with your questions or comments anything you want us to know. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Heather. Off you go.
Oh, thank you. I'm very happy to be here today. I felt a big urge and reached out to Tantra and kind of forced a certain amount of conversation, like what she described back in 2015 when I glommed on. I'm a chiropractor and I do a lot of cranial sacral therapy, and I was experiencing a lot both in my personal life in regards to anxiety and also tracking that with my patients on the table. And so when I met Tantra, who came in as a patient to review blood work, all of a sudden I had this strange, I thought fairy godmother now. Now that I know you better, it's not quite your in a different way, more like an incredible mentor and coach and dear friend after all these years. And I truthfully don't know where I would be without the knowledge and the structure. What I always felt from the very beginning was that speaking with Tantra gave me the structure and the language for what I was experiencing that I had never been trained in. Nobody had ever talked to me about. We don't understand. We don't have systems anymore for training what I call the mystical mind. And so the book she is mentioning, is You as the Mind of Creation. And yeah, so it was like March of 2019. Tantra asked if we could meet because she wanted to read me some things. So we met in my office and she started reading me chapters, and that opened up a zillion more questions. And I would say, Tantra, that the questions are still coming at you, probably with as much ferocity as they've always been. But basically she started reading to me about the meta mind and this mind of creation. And literally I just questioned and questioned and questioned and questioned. And we recorded every meeting. And then she would, because the way she was explaining things, like I could hear it, but it didn't really register for me. I couldn't like comprehend it. And so after a lot of questioning and kind of reworking things, I realized that I needed this book to be in existence, and I didn't know why. And I think that's a big part of the mystical mind. When you just know you need to do something. I call it the moment of can't not. Like it didn't make any sense. I had three young children. I was running a big chiropractic practice. I was definitely struggling with my own health issues after having those three kids. And yet I'm like, we're writing this. You have to write it. I'm coming to New Mexico at least 3 times a year. So it was an incredible 4 years that we got to spend writing this. And I feel like I was reading some of it last night and going, wait, what? I helped edit this? Like, I don't even, these words are new to me, even right now. And so I feel like it's a living entity in itself, this book. And the things that I knew I needed in existence through Tantra's words and who she is in our world right now, is this idea of empathy and empathic response. Because when I went through my major health, like, so for me, it manifested in panic attacks and extreme anxiety, starting at the beginning of 2015, kind of end of 2014, which really was, like, looking back at it, a huge awakening. But at the time, for a few years, I just felt like I was dying, which wasn't fun when I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. But what I realized after the course of my own training and running myself through multiple blood works, working with multiple practitioners, is that a large part of what I was suffering with is what we now call empathic response. It's empathy. And we live in a funny culture that does kind of separate things into boxes, as Tantra mentioned in the intro, where we have these interesting discussions of, are you empathic or are you not? And for me, I always felt like we're all empathic. We're all related. I mean, if we know anything about biology, like, we are interconnected. And so that was never a question for me. And Tantra was the first person that really explained empathy as sort of a glue that connects us all. And so when there's a glue that connects us all, which in the book we call big E, empathy, we're at the effect of that glue, right? And so when something's moving in the collective, it affects us. And the more sensitive we are, the more sensitive we are to this collective movement. And so what I realized, and what I feel like I've really been supported through in these last 8 years with Tantra, is really understanding. And then because I'm a clinician, I am very curious. I am constantly experimenting and trying to learn and create methods to help people. So so for me now, I really, as part of my diagnosis, and then also she mentioned vitality medicine. Vitality medicine is its own thing, but it started coming in for me in probably really in a big way, 2019, 2020. My hope is it's a new model of health that is based in vitality and reestablishing in the innate vitality of our systems. But part of a major tenet of vitality medicine is that the human design is an empathic design. And that when we look at our own health, and even when we make decisions about medicines or supplements or lifestyle, or even down to, are we going to go to this dinner or not? Are we going to go to this holiday party or not? Like, we really check in with our empathic design. And that, we're taught that our bodies are deficient, and that they're like, you just find the root cause of what's ailing you, and it's probably your liver or your blood sugar or your bad relationship. But I think in a big way, the root cause of what is ailing most of us, or causing dis-ease in our body, lack of ease, is that we are of an empathic design, and we live largely in realities that don't support our empathy, that aren't based in love and connection, and that we have to work really, really hard to establish those realities for ourselves in our own lives, and to feel like that's an important mission. It's important to center ourselves. And that's not a selfish thing, but that it's important to center ourselves in our own well-being and our own vitality, so that we can create these little micro realities of what we want to see in the world, in a larger way. I have a lot more to say, but that feels like a nice pause.
All right, so I've got two things. Before we came on the call, oh, I can't do it. I don't know the timeline. Somewhere around getting started, we talked about uh what humans are used to, at least, us Westerners, is to come from our position. And my perception when COVID happened, the mass position was a certain normalcy, and COVID busted that up. And then there was lots of reactivity, but everybody's in their positions. There's a lot of that after the election. But to a certain extent, what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling or experiencing is, even in trying to stay within the position as a comfort, as a navigational tool, coping mechanism, relational tool, something else is having to fall away. And that is producing massive amounts of anxiety, is what I'm aware of. And it's kind of like, it's so weird. I can just talk about it in weird terms. It's like pulling a thought process out leaves a void for something, and you can either regroup into something like similar to your position from before, or you're changing, but that movement produces it's a lot of physical symptoms and anxiety and emotional response. And I didn't expect that.
I just want to add to what Dr. Deb said, and that is that uh, when you can't find any position,
Yeah.
you get to confront the not yet known.
Yes.
And I think the other thing that Dr. Heather and Dr. Deb speak to is that we don't have a strong muscle for the not yet known as human beings. It's one reason I think it's valuable to take a position after all this conversation on whether you're positioning yourself on behalf of an evolutionary process or on behalf of a devolutionary process, and why Heather's work is so vital to me. Yes, because I all of you who have been on these calls before, and those of you in the work we're actually doing inside the field of Tantra Mat, have watched me become emergent physically. You've
Yeah.
watched me evolve physically. And I've been very transparent about what I went through as part of, I could have been devolving, but I stood with my body on behalf of that it seemed to be evolving. And if I could just stop freaking out about it, to be really blunt,
Yeah.
if I could find ways to stop, and I mean everything from glutathione to warm milk, to 24/7 of meditation, to creation exercises. I mean, when I had my heart condition for those months, December to June, when I was in that crisis, my entire world was only about de-stressing my system enough so the heart didn't kick out on me. And it was the most extraordinary. I have no mental learning, by the way, but I have a lot more body intelligence. I have a lot, and yes, on November 5th, you can go on one of the Facebook pages, or if you email the office at tantramont.com, I'll be glad to send you the article I wrote about that day. Symptomology, 1 minute I thought I was having a heart attack. The next minute I thought I was having a stroke. But I had enough knowing and what Heather's been talking about that I was just in a severe empathic response. That thought, and then my son called me, not my son, my my son, but he's adopted. I have a lot of adopted children. And Corey calls me and he said, "How you doing, Mama? You got the whole world running through your body right now." And so it's we're not doing this like in this conversation as an alternative of application to whatever you think you can apply. This is something we're living, something we're actually living at this moment. And a lot of what Heather pays attention to in her application and method, which she knows how much I'd like. But because of my irritation with method, she's created some really cool methods. So let me just say that, that I'm high anti-method centric. But when people create methods that give us back ourselves, I like those methods a lot. Deb, you, and then I can tell she's itching to talk.
The I'm can you address the technical aspects? I mean, I have a sense of body, mind, spirit, all the different aspects of being are interrelated, but that the last several days has really been a whole new recursion for me. Can you talk about, because anxiety is not a mental phenomenon, and letting go of certain thought forms or patterns of thinking or uh, ways of being, emotional states. I did not expect to discover such a physical uh, ripple effect and personality um, shift. And it's so personal. Can you talk about it like from a, I don't know, just talk, please?
Can I respond to that? With the beautiful, this is probably my favorite quote or my favorite paragraph in the book, which is about empathy and empathic response. And it says, imagine being in imagine being in the middle of the ocean, but not knowing it exists or that you are in it. When it moves, you find your body responding to it and moving with it. If you do not know you are in the ocean and you feel yourself being moved, you could think that something was wrong, not that something that you are connected to is moving and you are moving with it. So to me, that is when you said anxiety is not mental, you're coming from a psychotherapist, all of that point of view. So that's a big statement from you, right? You work with the mental mind. But if you understand empathy and empathic response, then you'll see that anxiety is truly not mental, like you're saying. But what if it is a response and also oftentimes an incredibly uncomfortable reaction to what is moving? And we are feeling it physically, we're trying to analyze it mentally. And because we're so mentally dominant in our culture, we think it's mental. But how does anxiety actually feel in the body, And that's, so when Tantra advertised this talk, she talked about the solar plexus, right? So the solar plexus is, I'm going to stand up so you can see. It is here, right? This is also the respiratory diaphragm. And if you think about when we feel moved in a negative way, maybe because we don't understand that, or maybe we're part of something that we don't like being part of, right? When we feel moved and when we have a stress response, that diaphragm clenches down. I mean, if you think about, we have all these vital organs, our heart and our lungs, our liver, all right there. You clench in to protect yourself. And that clenching can feel, Tantra just wrote a new little book, which is brilliant also. This one that's available on Amazon. But I'm just finished reading it last night. And what she talks about is the solar plexus in survival mode can create a tightness or knot-like sensation, butterflies or nausea, digestive issues. I've had a lot of patients say it feels like I've been punched in the gut. You know, some people experience it as like almost an acid reflux. And so we have these physical sensations of anxiety where our body registers things physically, right? And so again, if you go back to kind of maybe an expanded definition of anxiety as being beyond the mental, and we look at these physical sensations, we can feel like these physical sensations are very inconvenient. I don't like this feeling of tightness and being punched in the gut and this feeling of nausea. I mean, I can feel it right now. I don't know if you can check in with your body, but you know, it's I can feel that feeling at this moment, which I don't really love that feeling, right? However, if we are very clear that we are operating on behalf of the whole and on evolution, on life generating evolutionary trajectories, then maybe when we feel those things, we can think about things like, how can I transmute that into light and love and wholeness? Or, oh, maybe this is just excitement. There's a real spectrum. I think about this a lot between anxiety and excitement. Like, can I tug this a bit and bring it from anxiety into excitement? And I think, you know, from a body point of view, then we have a little more choice. And I think that's really, to me, that's really important to feel choice, because that feels like power and also freedom for me. And then what she talks about, it actually before that, one of the key things Tantra has taught, but I would say was an important teaching in the field of Tantra Mat, is the idea of recursions and change cycles and moving always to the next greater whole. And there was a recent call that I listened to where she really said, we're always moving to the next greater whole. However, sometimes it happens in devolutionary ways where things literally go to compost. And sometimes they happen in evolutionary ways where it's like light. I mean, she didn't say this part, but for me, it's like, yay, joy. This is right. I call it right world. I'm in right world at this moment, right? So, but they all result in the same up leveling into your next level of wholeness. And especially if you take a broader view of time, right? If we really are stuck in this moment or in the next years, we might get really devastated or feel more stressed. But if we look at the arc of time, it swings towards justice, right? Says Martin Luther King. So then in this new little booklet she put out, she talks about supporting the solar plexus and what happens when the solar plexus activates actually as a sign of realignment. And so she says this, the solar plexus is the center of inner power and agency, and replacing that feeling of anxiety and tension with, when you feel that, you recognize you're being pinged as your center of, I would say, vitality and your own inner divine spark and agency, and inner power. And I would also add in selfhood, right? And that when we feel this tightness now in our bodies and we feel this constrictions in the moments we're in, because I would argue that we're in a moment of constriction, we're always expanding, contracting, that maybe that is what she says is, we learn to recognize that was once perceived as anxiety is a sign of realignment. And I think that's brilliant. And my prayer is that we are in a moment of realignment, and that we can keep our mental and emotional selves happier and healthier if we sort of put the judgments at bay and the points of view at bay, and we trust in a greater process of alignment, realignment.
I want to add to that, because, and Victoria, I'll then turn it over to you. Listen, people, we're in a Renaissance edge. What I was shown, everything, and everybody's head will go up and down, or maybe not. Everything I pointed to for the last 45 years has occurred in this trajectory. And one of the biggest things it said is this will be the fastest human renaissance in known human history, 22 through the end of 26. And when this whole thing came down, and I did that 23-page book in 10 hours, talk about being under the pressure of the empathy of creation. One of the things that I was so excited about, Heather coming on today, is now we do our research. And that's why I made that vela, because it wasn't like saying something's a fact. We are up to new facts now. We're in a new survival mode because we're not fighting dinosaurs. Well, we won't go into that. We're actually evolving with like everybody says, so many people have said to me, while it feels completely like a panic attack, my spirit seems to be calm. That I've never heard that. Next year is 60 years of me being inside your all's minds doing psychic readings. Never have I ever heard that. So one of the reasons I wrote that vela, and I was so excited about Heather coming on, is now how do we calm the solar plexus? And I think it's so uncanny, Heather, that what started all this for you was a panic attack, was a gut. I mean, talk about being part of a larger system telling you to, hey, pay attention. You have to be there for people, in the next 20 years so they can use the medical world, in quotes, and the mind world, in quotes, and the consciousness or spirit world to literally be able to reduce the effect. It's just like the difference when somebody's caught in the ocean anybody ever been caught on a what do you call it, raft, like the little raft in the ocean, and suddenly it was going to shore and the next minute something happens that it's going out to sea. It takes a skill set. It takes a skill set of, first of all, not panicking. And the second one is, how do you just keep figuring out that one wave takes you out, the other wave takes you back in. And, you got to get system smart, primordial system smart. And that's the part, Heather, I'd like you to, I know I'm throwing you a curve maybe, but we're talking about our primordial system, people. Do you know why we're sitting here? Not because who went into office. Not because of McDonald's, not because of your churches or your synagogues or your mosques. It's our primordial system that has humanity still here. It is a kick butt system. And it's just busy about itself right now. Why? Because it has been what has had humanity survive under unbelievable conditions that even wiped out the biggest creatures we've ever had on this earth. I make my point. Over to you, Victoria.
What a beautiful segue to my, I have so many images coming up. When we first started this conversation, I said, all right, we're going on a deep dive. And that's what I have found in my scuba experience, is when it's anxiety too much on the surface of the water, I go down and it's calm. So I had that image come up from the get-go. What I'd like to do is kind of pull the primordial piece that you brought in and thread back to what you said, Doc Heather, about our empathic design. And just those two words, I just want to flesh that out more, because I think that's like the key to how we do navigate these ups and downs of the waves that are coming upon us. And my example of that, to segue in a little, is I remember Tuesday evening going to sleep early and saying, let me just be in dream time. And I woke up 1:30ish in the morning, and I had a wave of nausea come over me. And instantly, as how my system has reset over the years, instantly I said, ah, something has percolated with the election results. And I just checked my phone and said, okay. And I went back to sleep. And then I was awakened like from a dream state that I can't quite recall it because it got interrupted at 4:30 or something, and it was clear. And I said, okay, clear. And I went back to sleep. And that feels to me that's that relationship of how I know primordial empathic design. But I'd love for you to just kind of simplify how you talk to people about what their empathic design is.
Well, I mean, I guess I would explain it how I explained it at the beginning of the call, which is that we're all connected. And then the other, quote that I love is that Rumi quote, where you're not a drop in the ocean, but you're an entire ocean in a drop. But then I'm highly technical, and people aren't paying me for my philosophy yet. Maybe. But they want to feel better in their bodies. That's why they're paying me. That's my job, right? And so actually back in like 2016, when I was going through all my own dark night of the soul, I wrote this paper, which is on my blog, which is called The Wisdom of Self-Check-In. And I actually, this call is making me realize I need to update this, because while vitality medicine does today that the human design is an empathic design, there's many aspects of being human, including the physical body, which is our home for this life, right? And so if there's something physiological going on, we have a medical system that's trained brilliantly in physiology. If you have a disease or need medical help, there's great solutions right now for us. And so that's a really easy access point, I feel. Like say if you have anxiety. So however, that said, we need to expand our understanding of physiology to include things like the adrenal system, the stress response system, and blood sugar stabilization, and actual optimal reference ranges for like thyroid health, et cetera. Because what the mainstream medicine is very excellent at is helping with disease processes. But what I personally crave is vitality. And how do you achieve vitality in the system, which is not absence of disease, it's actual vitality, right? Optimized health. And so I run blood panels for people that have what I call vitality markers. And those vitality markers are sometimes run in mainstream medical, like vitamin D, B12, a few thyroid markers. However, we really expand upon those markers to include things like cortisol and DHEA to measure the adrenal glands, and quite a few more thyroid markers. And I love doing sex hormones now that I'm in perimenopause. And when we have a physiological system that's out of balance, to me, that's like way easier to fix than having a empathic response to the collective, right? And if you don't have a strong constitutional basis of vitality in your system, and that vitality doesn't need to be absence of disease. It doesn't have to be a fully abled person. It doesn't have to be a certain age, right? It spans the whole experience of human existence. But when we don't have that vitality when it's something that there is truly a deficiency that you can measure on blood work and then fix with either medicine or natural supplements or a lifestyle change, then freaking fix the physiology. That's like a really easy part. And so in my Wisdom of Self-Check-In paper, I actually have a checklist.
Heather, before you go any further, I want to say something about that.
Good.
My memory, which is what you all have to cope with when you deal with me, isn't this lifetime. My memory is very, very clear about lifetimes where we weren't recovering from disease. We were keeping our body in a primordial world, able to deal with the checks and balances of this primordial world, which is life and death, which is collapse and expand, which is so my whole memory, it's why I love working with Heather. My whole memory is that our bodies were once considered vital, and the medicine, let's put it in quotes, so it isn't necessarily the medical system we have now completely. Medicine was to restore our vitality to be fully alive in a sensory, physical system. And we've lost our ability to be sensorily fully alive in a physiological system. I mean, down to the fact, everybody remember that I haven't even talked to Heather about this, so I say the next thing. So I don't put her on the spot. But, I could not get back from something that happened to me. I had too strong an empathic response. So and I had COVID again. So I had this thing called an NAD infusion. I'm not promoting it, but it blew me out of the water because it became black and white in those 3 hours I had that infusion. I could tell that my physiological body had no ability to recover if I wanted to stay functional. If I wanted to go back to bed for 3 months, I would have done fine over a 3-month period. But I actually watched my spirit and my flesh re-knit in that infusion. It still has blown my mind, by the way. But it isn't so much about that and about it's about what Heather talked about. For the first time, I had something have an instant response in my body that just reset everything that was trying on its own to be vital. I'd never had that happen. And this book that she's talking about literally happened the next day. Literally. And so, Heather, there's something I want us to try for this because I want to try for something. So what I think is why this conversation, and of course, Heather and I are going to talk about, now we have to talk about the meta body. We have to talk about the body that is not only a survival system, but also a creation-based system. We have to now start intelligizing ourselves in this, because the mental mind can just mess you up in the pre-existing deficiency of body. Just stay upright. I mean, I was around when homeopathy started. Do you know I would be dead if I'd not found homeopathy? Because I was so empathic. I was going in the hospital with 103-degree temperatures, and they kicked me out and told me I was psychosomatic. But I was dying. So it's a both and, which is, of course, a unified field. It's a both and. So Heather, let's go after how to pay attention right now. And because you come from vitality, and obviously I do too. I wouldn't be upright if I didn't come from vitality, given the amount of energy, consciousness that moves through me. How people might orient as an exploration. As an exploration, and what you just started talking about is so, but I feel like we're in one of these times where we have to get up to date on current about what can be provided. You know, just going to the blood test, we're good. Just going to the blood test, I just found out from my endocrinologist that the only thing they're treating me, pardon me, I'm not an opinion. I'm not. I'll try not to show it on my face. That the only thing they're treating me for is my thyroid. They do no other blood panels except to check my thyroid. I almost fainted on one side, and the other side, great, clear about the information. I'm clear. So if I'm paying attention to a whole system response and I'm still fatigued, and it's not, my thyroid is brilliant right now, brilliant. So it makes no sense of fatigue. Do you understand? Except now we have what Heather's talking about. We have these wellness clinics and these infusions and these B12 injections. We need to relearn our world. Just like it took me 2 years to get homeopathy when I was in my first had my kids, because it was inconceivable to me that the doctor told me about my children that they both needed ear shunts for ear infections. And my neighbor told me they needed belladonna, which is a homeopathic remedy. And then I did it. And she said, now ears are going to hurt for about a half an hour. The ears hurt for a half an hour. And guess what? They went back to the doctor and did the shunts. So it isn't, we can't, and the last thing I want to say, we cannot be in an either or world. In the community of the field of Tantra Mat, I've lost 2 people because they didn't go to the hospital when they needed to find out what was wrong with them. 2 people. And I'm not having it.
Yeah.
So we've got to realize that all systems are trying to move to the next greater whole. The medical, like one of our youngest people who's a doctor, when I was going through all this, she calls me the day I've decided to do the NAD infusion to tell me I should do the NAD infusion, only to find out this young whippersnapper is going into longevity medicine. I read her when she was 9 years old. So we're in a new landscape of physiological self-care. And I think that's so bloody exciting. And I don't think it's an accident, is the timing is when we're really going to need it. Over to you, Heather.
So you said, how do you orient as an exploration? And I think the most important orientation is that you're worth it.
Mm.
Right? And that it's important that you care for yourself. And I try to explain this to all my patients, that when people don't understand, but that when maybe this isn't true of everybody, but that we're always thinking about other people and trying to make the world better and caring for our families and our friends. And so that when we care for ourselves, it's caring for the entity that cares for all, right? And so even if you don't have enough self-worth, feelings of self-worth to take care of yourself because you are important, but you are important and you are the most important, then do it because you act on behalf of others and on behalf of the wholeness of the entire planet and beyond. So to me, that's absolutely essential. And we have this really messed up society that teaches you're not enough. And that's cultural. And that's actually very dominant in the US, as taught by Julio from that coaching class we did, Tantra, the Newfield.
Yeah.
He teaches all over the world, but he's originally from South America and he's in his 70s now. And he said, the I'm not enough is the US. And it's true. I have an Italian exchange student. I made friends with a bunch of other exchange students right now. And I'm questioning them and they do not have the I'm not enough. And I'm like, oh, this is why the Romans conquered the world. They just love hanging out. They're happy. They're like, anyway. So that's the first moment and standpoint of orientation, is that it is absolutely essential to start with yourself. And don't think of it as selfish, because it's not. And then the next thing is that What is available and provided for right now? What do we have available? What are the tools in the moment of time we live in? And then the third thing is everything is your ally. If you live in a world that's connected, not an either or, then everything becomes your ally. Your doctor should be your ally. I always ask people, who's your healing team? You should have a healing team that are your allies. And if you don't feel like your doctor's your ally, you need to find a new doctor, right? And what Tantra really taught me is you don't have to like that doctor sometimes. Like when you had your surgeon that took out your cancer, you went to the very best surgeon. He had terrible bedside manner, but he was the best surgeon. But you have to have a feeling of allyship with that particular person and with that team. And then also medical treatments, medicine itself, surgeries and supplements, and even foods, the air we breathe, these are all allies. And so there shouldn't be, in my opinion, fear around going and getting a surgery. I recommend people to surgeries all the time, and they're very surprised about that because I'm a chiropractor. I think chemotherapy is fantastic. Why? Because my mom went through cancer and lost her will to live. And as soon as she started chemo, even though she got way sick, her will to live came back. And so I made a little Instagram post about that if you want more details, because it's a little more nuanced than that. But if we come from a world where everything's connected and everything has a place, which is the realities of unity, where Tantra and I really, really deeply connect, then none of these things are to be feared. But once you have a sense of selfhood, so my mom was brilliant in that she said, finally, okay, I'll do the chemo because my sister bribed her with a trip to Paris when she was done. Brilliant. But she said, but I'm going to start at half dose and we'll see if I do the entire 12 infusions. And we were just so happy she would start with half dose as kids, because how I talk to my patients is I want to live in a way that I have no regrets. And mainstream medicine doesn't have very many like screening tests for women particularly. But and we have some tools that might be barbaric, like chemotherapy, which it is poison, but it acts on behalf of our life, right? So to make choices where we have no regrets. And so that was why we pushed my mom into chemo. And she knew herself and her sensitivities. And again, as part of Vitality Medicine, one of the things I want to create is like an empathic score that physicians could use. And if you have score highly on an empathic score, then don't start with full dose medicine. You won't be able to handle it, right? But the way she did her chemo, it did operate on behalf of her own life. And that was 2011. And she's been, she's going to die of something else. So I think there's a lot of living in what Tantra has taught me as realities of separation. These things can become fearful, but if we have the confidence in ourselves to go and find our correct team, and then we recognize that things can be our true allies, we have a lot of power and say in how we're responding on a physical level to our empathic design.
Look, people, and that includes those of us, I'm going to go over 15 minutes. And if anybody needs to leave, please do. But I've got a thread going on, you know, on the screen that I don't want to stop it now. They're just beginning to heat up. Okay. And I just want to say one thing about, I think we're in such an extraordinary moment in time. And we were talking about before we came on, some of us, I love what you said about she re-got her will to live. I think that's a good mantra for all of us right now.
Mhm.
In a society that has had it easy, we lose the will to live when it isn't easy anymore. That's ridiculous. We should be grateful for how many hundreds of years in all our bubbles and all our crappy things we did to other people. But we've had and recompense for a lot of the damage we did because all of us here are white, uh, that we did when we came to these shores. But then resetting the field within which everybody can live in harmony, grace, beauty together. So, but the main thing is the will to live. We forget that. You know, we we live with guilt. And I'm going to speak about white right now. As Caucasians, a lot of us really live with guilt of what we did. But if you look at the world, in internal cultures, Africans sold Africans as slaves. In this culture, we have a violent Indians that literally wiped out other Indians. So we're all in every race and every species. We've been fighting through this thing called why do human beings want to kill each other? Why do we want to harm each other? But that happened to us as a collective, all colors, collective. Which you listen to Greg Baden, there's lots of conversation. Listen to so many people, Rudolf Steiner, Rudd, I can't remember his first name, Rudolph Rudd, the astrologist. Something happened a very, very long time ago that turned the species against itself. We're just resurrecting the original nature of the original design of human beings. So this thing you addressed, Heather, about the will to live is key. Because everybody is mostly, not everybody, but a lot of human beings just make it through the day. And by the way, I was one of the worst because I came with a mission. And up until I got cancer, I was just let me let me get my job done and get out of here. And I would laugh and say, this is not where I want to be for vacation. And a lot of that's still true, by the way. And but I discovered a different vitality when I restored my will to live for the sake of living in the weirdness of the present times that I began to realize we all got born on behalf of. That's another part of the empathy, isn't it, Heather? The other part of the empathy is we are a drop in the ocean. So that ocean is now in present time. And so we must be part of its fluidity. We must be part of its movement. And how do we tend to that? Hopefully with more grace and ease. Over to you and anybody else. Deb, did you have
Yeah.
something?
I'm trying to narrow down my somethings. I'm finding, see, I'm having trouble narrowing down my somethings. So I think for me, as an individuated being, I come from mental, cognitive, and how it relates to beingness. I think I'm waking up into how all of that is inseparable from physicality. So for the will to live to have a physical impact, because your mother could have done the chemotherapy without a will to live, and it could have had no effect. And yet the will to live changed something. So as I'm listening to you and everyone else, Heather, that I'm really it's resolving the technical issue I came to the call with. It's not like I have all the information of how all the domains of existence uh, technically work from one point of view, but from the other point of view, I'm getting the technical inseparability. And that thyroid imbalances can have pretty big emotional and psychological impact, for example, is not new to you, but it's relatively new
To us.
to us. And that I think the reverse is true, and that empathic responses, which from a lot of ways people thought about empathy in the years up to the last couple of years. It was all in the spiritual realm, and a little bit of what I encountered was a little woo-woo. So this is given a connection to the sacredness of the physicality, the sacredness and the physicality enhances empathic response. Like they're not
Separate.
correct. So I'm getting a technical, I'm getting what I came for to the call, in addition to
Yeah, and I want to talk about tolerance point, and then we're going to leave it to you after that, Heather, for the next few minutes. Because I have personally spent a few years post-COVID to have to deal with no vitality. And if I didn't have the spiritual level of will, and I didn't have a collective, a community that was there for me and I was there for them, my will to be here could diminish rapidly. And what I think I don't want to miss, Heather, in this, and all of us in this conversation, is the fact that our biology, our psychology is not always what makes us lose interest in life. And yet we think it is our psychology that makes us lose interest in life. And we don't take the initiative, or don't even know, maybe this call will do that, to take the initiative to find out what for the body restores, and the brain, because I want to use them different here, restores its vitality, that then restores your ability to be fully functioning in life. And I don't want to miss or have Deb misheard. It wasn't her mother's personality that had the will to live. It was the result of feeling vital again after the chemo that restored her ability to live. And when I got so kicked, we won't go into that, the last month after I was finally well again, I didn't want to go through the same 6 months I'd just gone through when there was nothing wrong with me. My thyroid was fine. But where my spirit and flesh operated is because I got a empathic response of taking on a whole collective for a week. I didn't have anything of my own merit to get me back. And that NAD infusion got me back after 5 days of glutathione every hour in the hour. That we could consider medical, but it wasn't. It was vital. And that's the word. That's what we're talking about. What is vital for us right now in our ability to restore our system so we can create and be part of new systems rising. Okay, the rest of the time is yours, Heather.
So the first step for what is vital for us right now is from my training is your physiology is something you can address on your own. So I have on our website papers on a blog and a post on vitality markers. These are blood markers that you can order from your own cash lab. We have a cash lab. You can ask your doctors. And it has how to interpret the vitality markers because you have to narrow reference range and you have to look for patterns. And I personally work with people from out of the area, but my hope is that vitality medicine as a model will be something that multiple practitioners will be able to participate in, assuming they have the parameters. And so that's a really easy one. You mentioned thyroid, Deb. I have a blog on thyroid, and I don't want to go into it now, but it regulates the rate of metabolism of every single cell in your body. So if that thyroid isn't functioning optimally, every single cell goes slowly. And you can't feel vital. you might even lose your will to live because it's too hard to push the river every single day to get through. All right. And then the unfortunate thing is that you actually, what's most important to measure your thyroid is not usually measured, which is free T3, and there's specific reference ranges on my website. Luckily, there's a lot of functional medicine practitioners right now that are really refocusing and reframing this, but it isn't in mainstream practice yet. It will be. The other thing I really wanted to mention is embodiment. So part of what has fascinated me in my 8 years of knowing Tantra, or 9 years maybe now, I guess it's almost 10 years. Weird. Yeah, actually, that's almost true. Is that some people are more strongly spirit than flesh. And some people are driven out of their flesh due to trauma, personal trauma. And some people hardly inhabit their flesh because of the realities we were born into being so crummy that we don't want to be here in a physical way. And some people don't inhabit their bodies because their bodies don't feel good because they're eating the standard American diet. And sometimes you're injured. And so the body is not a place that feels safe. And maybe it doesn't even feel like it's yours, which is a bit of what autoimmunity is, which is when the body attacks itself, right? That's what autoimmunity is. So with Tantra, it was really interesting because she was born so dominantly psychic with a mystical mind and then had early childhood experiences of everything going against life, right? This isn't the world I thought I was coming into. That when I met her, she was 70 and she wasn't embodied. I had the privilege of being raised by a chiropractor, fed all organic food. My parents have been TM meditators and doing yoga since they were 20. Like I had a very different upbringing where embodiment and the value of the body. Deb, you said the sacredness of physicality. I love that. But I was taught from the very beginning that my body is a temple and why would you pollute your temple? And as a result, I've never really drank alcohol. I've never done drugs. I've eaten organic my whole life. Like, I'm unique. I've had the gift of a lot of privilege with that reality. And so embodiment with Tantra has been a really great, I would say, 6-year process. And she's been embodied for a few years now. But it's hard to decide that your body is a safe place to be. And not only that, but once you get comfortable in your body, you recognize all these incredible mechanisms that are constantly working on your behalf. And that's part of the meta body. And actually today I have an interview. I get to interview Gil Headley, who is a master dissector and anatomist, and he is in town this weekend, and I reached out to interview him. He'll be my first vitality medicine interview, but he has been dissecting the human body for 20 years and just found all these incredible miraculous processes. So unfortunately, how we're trained again is through separation. And so you don't really feel a connection to the body and to your selfhood in that body and the incredible miracles of the body, typically in education. So that's something that I aim to change. But what I realized, Tantra, you mentioned earlier, a physical panic attack, so that we're now experiencing things on a physical level, or maybe that's the word I call it, that our mental mind isn't affected by and our emotional body necessarily. And that's very different. So when I first started experiencing my panic attacks, they were very physical, but they were very also mental and emotional because I literally thought I was dying. And my brain was telling me I was dying. My body was telling me I was dying. And the first, I would say, physical panic attack I experienced was when I was with you, Tantra, when you were having your heart ablation, right? And the day she had her surgery, I was there to basically help hold the container and networking out, because anything we go through with Tantra is a full system response. And so I knew I was in for a lot, but by the afternoon of being at the hospital all day with her and holding space, my blood pressure actually went up. And I could tell something was wrong. And there were these lovely nurses at the New Mexico Heart Hospital. So it's like, can you just check my blood pressure? And I was running 160, 180 over 140 or something bad, right? But what was really interesting, and they were like, you should probably go over to ER, like across the way. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be with Tantra. She's like, just got out of her surgery, but my mind, I was okay. And that was what was really weird, because I hadn't experienced that. Because even in my old panic attacks, usually my body actually stayed, besides running lab high cortisol for years, I never really had any heart symptoms. I didn't, like, there were a lot of things that happened with a lot of people's panic attacks that didn't happen with mine. But this particular physical panic attack, my mental emotional state, I'm like, I think I'm fine. I think I'm fine. I think I'm like, this was a little much. Like my my body is telling me, like, and if you think of it from an empathic model, I was in a huge empathic response, because I had to be the one to hold the space for Tantra. And that is a big deal. So, and then the other thing that was really neat about that particular experience was that, so really important in the fields of Tantra and in the field of vitality medicine is transparency and vulnerability. Like, vulnerability is such a gift if you learn how to embrace it. I've done that. But transparency is still an issue for me, as far as finding the right people that I can be truly open with and vulnerable with. And it's not always my loved ones, it's very dependent. But in that particular moment, I was able to call my husband and walk around, pace around the hospital and just say, I am like having a serious panic attack here. Like, something is really wrong. And yet, like, I'm not going to go to ER because I know I'm okay. And it was just a really interesting experience. And as we're having this conversation, I'm recognizing that that is a sign of embodiment. A physical panic attack or anxiety, a manifestation in your physical body, when my mental, emotional mind could stay present and observing, but not participate. To me, that's definitely an up-leveling, right? Definitely a new operating system. So things I track are like, oh, we have an operating system of fear, another blog in my website, but operating system of fear in our body. How do we upgrade to an operating system of love, right? This, to me, I'm always looking for like signs and symptoms of up-leveling. So anyway, those things came together for me as we were talking.
Yeah, I think it's a great pause. Also, the same thing for me. I was in the ER every week for a week with a heart condition, and yet I was having no symptoms. It was just
Mental, emotional. You were having plenty of physical.
having no heart palpitations. I was having none of the things they kept asking me that would show that I was about to have a heart attack or I was about to have a stroke. They weren't there. None of them. The only thing they were gearing off was the blood pressure and the pulse. That's all they had. None of the other symptoms. So there's no answer to a question here, except I knew it was an issue of embodiment. I knew that all the years of trauma, all the years of being out of body, it was going to take me a minute, my body and I a minute, to figure out how the spirit and flesh work. That's why I think the NAD infusion was such a marker for me, because I felt all the work I'd done since December 1st, all being part of a collective where we're all operating as a larger, when you're operating as a larger ocean, then we have more strength, stamina, capacity individually to handle transmutation, which is what we're in. We're in transmutation. We are evolving in our physical form that allows for us to pick up multidimensional relationships with a much larger world than just our isolated TV, beer, and McDonald's. And it's going to take a minute. It's just going to take a minute. So we're going to stop at this pause. Thank those of you that held the space here and those of us that chatted. And, Heather and I are aware that we're in the movement of something now that would serve humanity just to be informed. And we're smart creatures, human beings, and information that allows us to be the source space and the agency of our own existence is quite exciting for many human beings at this time. And we consider it a privilege to have this conversation. More to come. I'll post on CreateAWorld the interviews that Heather's starting, and I already posted the website, and we'll take it from here. Thank you all.